she came back with quite a badass reply. So do have a look at that. That was quite cool.
Oh, nice.
Good fun. Yeah, and in the Rijksmuseum, in the most important hall, the main hall, where also the night watch is hanging, actually all the painters are male, and today for the first time they've hung and replaced some of the paintings with female painters. So that's also very revolutionary for the Rijksmuseum. So that was also very nice.
Cool.
It's all about awareness, right?
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we are ready to go. So good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you are. It's morning for me. We have people from all over here. So thank you so much for joining our panel today in honor of International Women's Day. So it's very exciting. We have a great group of really influential women. What I love about this group is everyone's coming from a different industry, different points in their career, different roles. So our hope is that between all of our perspective, there's a little bit of something for everyone. We're going to try to cover a number of pretty big topics, but try to focus them a bit to kind of the immediate worlds that we're living in. So that is our plan. I'd like to start just by having everybody introduce themselves. I should introduce myself first. So my name is Kristen Cronin. I am the head of US marketing for Dept. I have been with Dept for a little over a year. And prior to that, I had various marketing roles for some technology companies here in Boston, where I am. So I would then turn it over to Andrea to please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Christine, and for Dept for the invitation and the great initiative. So hello to all of you. I'm Andrea, the CEO of Hess Natur, the most sustainable fashion brand in the German-speaking region and market leader in Europe. The clothes we wear should neither exploit the people who make them nor poison our environment. This is what we stand for. 45 years ago, Hess Natur founded the fair fashion movement. I like to say we were organic long before it became a trend or a buzzword. Maybe you are hearing about us for the first time today. That's why we are currently working hard to increase brand awareness. We want to reach more people who would love to make an impact wearing fashion for a better tomorrow. So, and I'm focusing strongly on our communications. Together with talented teams and partners like Dept, I strive to improve our impact day by day.
Great, thank you. And Olga, how about you?
How about me? Manager digital marketing for Nikon in the European region. Having a bit of a different challenge here because I'm trying to connect the technology with the digital marketing in an e-commerce level for all of Europe. So that's basically my short introduction.
Nice. That's a big job. So, and then how about Natalie?
Yes, hi everyone. I oversee our sponsorship portfolio at Philips within our brand team. But next to my current position, I also am very much involved in inclusion and diversity within marketing within Philips to actually enhance our representation, because I think as a brand, you need to represent the society and your customers. So we're really making sure that whatever we do in marketing, whether it's the tone of voice or the visual representation, that our customers recognize themselves. So that's always been part of me, and to see the importance of inclusion and diversity. So I'm an ally for the topic.
Great. And last, Harry.
Hi, my name's Harry Miller. I'm the Corporate Comms Director at St. James's Place. We're a FTSE 100 wealth management company, one of the largest in Europe. You may not have heard of us. We've kind of flown under the radar a little bit, possibly a little bit more media attention in the last couple of years, and some of it not so good. So I've joined St. James's Place around 9 months ago with a number of different challenges. I think financial services, if any of you guys work in financial services, you'll know that there's quite a journey to go on in terms of inclusion and diversity. And in St. James's Place, we know that we are as much in that space as in any other organisation I've worked in retail banking. So lots of good challenges, lots of stuff that I've got my teeth into since I've joined.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the introductions. And just before we get into it, housekeeping. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to just put them into the chat box. We will try to leave a few minutes at the end to address as many as we can. And with that, let's get into it. So as I mentioned, we kind of want to hit on a bunch of topics. So we tried to break them up into little segments. So the first one that we thought would be interesting to spend a little time on is just this idea of brand purpose and really the role that digital plays in trying to convey a brand purpose. And I think all of us could, looking back on a lot of things over the last year, I think this idea of wanting to align yourself and the things that you buy to brands that share the same purpose and the same values as you has kind of become even more important. There's plenty of data that exists that shows that consumers are more loyal to purpose-driven brands. And so I thought it might be nice to hear differing perspectives on how each of these brands are thinking about their brand purpose. So I'm going to start with you, Natalie. From your perspective, why do you think brand purpose has become so important to consumers, particularly over the last year?
Yes, I think there are so many brands to choose from. So people tend to be much more investigating about the story behind the brand and the proposition and how they produce, a little bit like Andrea shared about her products earlier. People are much more aware of society and the impact that we as consumers have on nature, for example. So I believe that people really want to understand the brand, and therefore brands are also sharing much more their purposes in general. And you just see also based on research that indeed if you represent your purpose towards your customers, that they tend to be much more loyal to you and choose you as a brand. I mean, if I just think of my own type of journeys as a consumer, I tend to also choose my preferred brands based on the information I have about how the brands are living their purpose.
Yeah. And you mentioned loyalty. Olga, from your perspective, given the role that you're playing, how are you using digital marketing and digital campaigns to build more loyalty with the customers that you have?
Well, I think my personal view on customer loyalty is that if you want to have loyal customers, be loyal to your customers first. And I think opening up the possibilities that the whole digital is opening to us is making a lot of opportunities there to display loyalty to your existing customers. So if you want to really increase your customer loyalty, make sure that yourself are loyal to your customers first. I also think we need to make sure that it's worth it to be a loyal customer. So whatever kind of digital customer journey you're looking at, make sure that you can actually add value that is really seen as value for these customers. That's something that we honestly believe in, that we're really trying to do day by day. So really focusing on the customer needs, make sure all the enhanced services that you can provide are actually happening. And how you want to do that? Data is the magic word.
Yeah.
So really making good understanding of the choices that your customers are facing and what is moving them and driving them to make the questions, make the decisions that they're actually facing.
Yeah. And Andrea, how do you see within your space, how are the brands kind of conveying their purpose? You know, obviously your brand stands for a big purpose. You know, you can speak specifically to that, but also I'd love to hear your perspective just on the fashion industry as a whole.
Thanks, Christine, for this question. This topic is very close to my heart. And especially in the fashion industry, the pandemic brought this topic to the forefront. To be honest, this development is not new, but it strongly accelerated since the pandemic began. We notice in terms of purpose and sustainability, and many statistics prove this, that people, especially due to the pandemic and especially the younger generations, are much more oriented towards values. And this applies to brands as well to potential employers. people want to know what a brand or an employer stand for and what impact it has, its purpose. So these two aspects have led all the fashion companies to open up to sustainability in recent months. So, and I'm pretty sure that it's not a trend, it will stay.
Yeah, and there's certainly some commonalities that exist, I think, between the three brands that we've heard from. But Harry, I think you come at it from a bit of a different perspective, being in the industry that you're in. So how should like a financial services firm can think about a brand purpose? How would they go about communicating it from your perspective?
So I think that in financial services, maybe controversially, I don't know, but in financial services, when you think of a product in financial services terms, you're thinking about loans, current accounts, or in my instance, kind of wealth management services. And it can often feel like a product is a product is a product, and people make decisions based on price and rate. Obviously, that's what we're dealing with, money and people's money, protecting people's money or offering credit lines. So it becomes, to differentiate yourself, it's quite hard. So you do really have to rely heavily on your brand purpose to tap into the other elements of decision making that consumers make. Also, our whole industry in financial services got a proper kicking after the financial crash a number of years ago, and you guys will all be very well versed in it and will have experienced it in some way, shape or form. And so there was a big job for all of us across the industry to realize that having a purpose doesn't just mean kind of shiny bobbins. It's you've got to have a real backbone within your organization. Your culture has to reflect it, your brand reflects it, the decisions you make reflect it, and for us to understand that it's deeper than that and actually has a deep commercial imperative for financial organizations. And I think we're catching up with a lot of other brands on that.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I think this kind of goes into the next idea of just transparency and authenticity and how that all rolls into a brand purpose. Like they all are very much connected, and they're connected from an external perspective, but also in the internal company that you're trying to create. And so, we could say a transparent brand is really supported by a transparent and authentic workplace. So in us talking before all of this, there was a good discussion around, certainly around, yes, we all believe this, but how do you balance what you can and cannot be transparent about, both internally and externally, right? Like everybody wants to get behind transparency and wants to be authentic, but there is that sort of challenge, and it can't, there are inevitably things that you can't be transparent about. So Olga, maybe I'll start with you. I'd love to hear everybody's perspective on this one, but yours first.
Yeah, I think indeed this is something that everyone is facing, and probably also in each and every single position, because it's not only the question of being transparent, and if you're able to be transparent on all topics, but also what is the purpose of transparency in each and every single topic. I think it's important to map that out before you decide on what to share and what not. So within our company, we see this as well, and specifically in the internal teams, because if you put transparency too high on the agenda, you're spending so much time on sharing everything and to everywhere and to everyone, that is not efficient anymore, and also it doesn't add any value. So before trying to be transparent more and more and more often, think about what is the purpose of transparency within your team, within your organization, but also towards your customers. I think that is the key to come up with a good transparency framework.
Yeah, I love that. What about from your perspective, Harry?
So I totally agree. And you guys, when we had a chat previously, I think it's sometimes, my frame of reference is from an internal perspective. And there are often decisions that are coming in an organization, or they haven't quite yet been made. And, your instinct to be transparent, you have to curtail that to a degree until you have certainty for people, because giving them a half piece of information is very damaging for people. But what you can do when you are, when kind of people are expecting some news, say for example, you've got an organizational design decision that people can see is coming, but you're not ready to communicate it, then being very clear and transparent about the reasons you can't communicate it yet is really important. So it might not be the transparency that some people want, but being as transparent as you can about the decisions you're making is really vitally important, certainly from an internal perspective. Too much information can be damaging sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a great way you put it, of being transparent about why you can't be transparent. It's not easy. What about anybody else want to weigh in on this one?
So I personally have a very open and honest communication within the management team, but also with all employees. And I try to communicate all relevant topics, including bad messages. So what I think is very important, and people does not want to hear sunny news only. So this is what I would like to focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say with transparency, it also gives a feeling of trust, because then even if you indeed cannot share yet what the outcome might be or the objective, at least if you already have that feeling of trust, then as an employee, you can just have that patience maybe and trust your manager or the organization or whatever the objective and task is to do it correct. And of course, sometimes it's just too early for commercial reasons for that it cannot be mentioned externally because it might impact your business, or because of data restriction or privacy restrictions, right? So usually there is a reason why, but it's how you deliver the message.
Yeah. How do you think, I'm going off script. How do you think we should think about measuring our ability to not like be transparent, but are we doing it well enough? Like, what are the signals that you look for? And maybe it's what you would look for within the employee base around you, but also externally. Like, are there signals that people can see that say, okay, yes, this is the level of transparency that our audience expects and is happy with, or no, we actually need to improve?
Yeah, certainly. And you can, sorry.
Oh, no, I'll go ahead.
I was just going to say that I've got a particular example in St. James's Place of an indicator, and I'm sure there are very many of these indicators. So in SJP, since I've joined, we've introduced a channel called Runway, which is it's a platform that allows people to ask questions anonymously if they'd like to. So a little bit like a Yammer or something like that, where you can ask a question or you can do some pulse polling. But the interesting statistic for us is in the demographic of people who want to be anonymized within those fields. And I think it's interesting today of all days that, what we found was if you were a person of color, then you were more likely to anonymize. If you were a woman, you were more likely to anonymize. If you were a certain period of your career, you were more likely to anonymize. If you were young, you were more likely to anonymize. And so what it said was if within this business, within SJP, you were more likely to feel that you were in a safe space if you were a white male of a certain tenure. And so for us, that was a real indicator to us that we had an area of trust within the organization, but there were key pockets within the organization where we needed to still build trust. And I think we can use this is where digital can come into its own, and data, as Olga mentioned earlier on, we can use it to our advantage to understand where those pockets are, because sometimes if you create a broad brush approach, it can turn a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to say as well. And I think it's interesting how you share that, because social listening, I think, can help you there, right? Because then you hear what your customers are saying, or if you have an internal platform, you can really hear the tone of voice and what people are sharing. But I think it's very interesting, Harry, what you were saying, that there was a profile that was almost the norm and the benchmark towards others, right? That really reflects also how complex the situation is.
Absolutely.
This is all of these topics are big, right? This is one that I think we could certainly spend more time on, but I did want to switch gears a little bit to the other elephant in the room, the pandemic. So, there's a lot we could unpack as it relates to the pandemic, but I want to think about it kind of in two ways, one a little more broad and then one more specific to the roles that we play. So the first part is just looking at the pandemic. It's affected us all in some way and in different ways, particularly for women, especially in the US, certainly where I am, but I think in other areas as well. We're seeing millions of women actually leaving the workforce over the last year. Globally, women's job losses are 1.8 times higher than men's due to, what's been going on. Certainly it's not the case everywhere, but it does raise sort of lingering issues around pay inequality, the undervaluing of the work that many women do, and certainly antiquated notions of raising children. So with that backdrop, I'm curious from all of you, have you seen the pandemic creating these types of hurdles for professional women in your countries? Or maybe is it sort of the flip side where you're also seeing perhaps more or different opportunities? Because we've had a good discussion about this separately, and it was interesting for me to learn actually in some areas, maybe perhaps there has been more opportunities for women. So maybe we can start with you, Andrea.
So thank you. First, I think we should encourage all women not to slip back into old gender roles, which has happened in part. Here in Germany, it was mostly the woman who took care of homeschooling and households, even if both parents were working office jobs from home. So, but there are also bright spots at Hess Natur. I know many families who have mastered these challenges wonderfully. They really have established equality at home, but we all know when we are looking to the management floors that we have 30% women in leadership positions only. So we are not there yet. I think we should take this issue to heart and raise our voices so that women don't fall back into old outdated roles by default, but rather support to continue the path to increase women in top leadership and decision-making positions.
Yeah. And Olga, what have you observed maybe local to you or just like looking across the company or your network?
Well, I'm more from a country perspective. We see that it's actually interesting to know that 80% of employees in medical care are women.
Yeah.
So we played a big role, and we really put our effort into this pandemic to solve it at least, or to care for it at least at that state. I also learned that my job is not crucial, which was like a hit in the face, because crucial jobs you could have make use of daycare and all of that. So yeah, that was a learning for me myself. I'm not that important. But I do think that it's also a hurdle, because now that we're in this pandemic and we face like a financial crisis afterwards, and of course there are a lot of metrics and calculations going on to indicate how big that is. But I do fear that diversity and inclusion may come down on the agenda again due to this financial crisis coming up. And that's something I think we all can pay attention to make sure that this topic deserves the spot on the agenda within every company, and make sure that we address it and make sure we think about how to make it happen within our own environment and within our own organizations. So yeah, I think it's good to keep on discussing the topic. But also on the other hand, what I see around me is that like basically everyone, young parents with children or without, has the goal to share all responsibilities for your household, your care of the kids, whatever, to spread it equally. But in reality, we're way more traditional than our goals actually. And based on facts and numbers, we see that only 10% manage to share it equally within the organization. And specifically in a pandemic situation, it's very difficult to make this happen. So I think we women should really stand up for ourselves, and men, make sure that you also stand up for this equally, so that you can actually achieve the goals and not act as traditional as we actually want. I think 90% of it is in our own hands.
Yeah.
Olga, it's very interesting that it's the same in Germany. And within the important healthcare sector right now in Germany, 75% of all employees, like nurses, doctors, pharmacists, etc., are women, but only 30% are in leadership or decision-making positions. So I had by women, so same.
Mm.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? I know, Natalie, you are obviously dealing with the working mom life.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's also a positive flip side to it all, also
Yeah.
from an inclusion and diversity perspective, that now that we notice that we actually can work virtual, it also opens up borders and being necessary in a office. So I think where before, for example, people that might have, I always forget the correct English word, that are handicapped, impaired, physically impaired,
Yep.
that maybe they have an issue coming into an office, or they can only work lying down. I'm just giving an example. That actually, now that we have proof that we can work virtually, it could also create opportunities for people that can work for a commercial company, although they cannot come physically to an office, or for indeed young parents, that they might are able to work more hybrid, and that they don't need to be in an office 5 days in a week, and that maybe will give them a little bit more flexibility to combine work balance, etc. So indeed, I hope that there will also come some positive insights out of this pandemic, and that we don't go back to a traditional way of working.
Yeah, can I jump in as well,
Yep.
Chris?
Yep.
So I agree with all those points from Natalie. I think that the digital environment is a great leveler. I think not just because of the flexibility that it offers, but also I've found, and I don't know whether you guys have found it, that people who in a room were quiet before and they felt that they were kind of a slightly restricted voice face to face, they're finding their voices much more. There's the more subtle ways of having your opinion by putting something in a chat, and somebody else can say it. I think that there is a bit of a leveler for the quieter voices too. I'm not one of those quieter voices. I'm quite happy to hear my voice, but I'm very aware that I can be, I can dominate a conversation, and it becomes much more obvious, I find, in digital channels using Teams or whatever you're using, to see where people aren't actually coming forward. I do think, well, I absolutely see those positives, but I also think that we are facing into a real dilemma, certainly in the UK, with our unemployment rates. So once the government support is withdrawn and we start to kind of normalize, I know normalization is a weird concept for us, but we will find a situation where those roles that go are lower down in an organization. And in financial services, we know that the roles that are nearer to the customer are the ones that women hold traditionally, for whatever reason it is. So people in branches tend to be women, and we haven't got the mix right in terms of our senior grades. The more people used to doing stuff online, the more of those roles will disappear, and quite quickly now. So it's kind of understanding, how do you skill up people and make sure that there are roles for them elsewhere to support them, so that we don't step significantly backwards on that journey with women.
Yeah. And maybe particular to women, or not, maybe broadly, but if you think more specifically to our day-to-day as marketers, as communicators, as sort of brand leaders, like, what are the things that we can do going forward to help ease the impact of the pandemic recession, like I said, on women, or just broadly speaking?
So, I mean, I think, not just in terms of our brand purpose and channels, whatever we're doing, I think that we've got, certainly in my sector, and I can only talk to my sector, it's where I've been for 20 years. I think there's a big role for us to do to encourage STEM subjects in schools, support young girls with knowledge around engineering, science, maths, and what you could use it for. It's not just for, construction kits aren't just for boys. And I know I'm being flippant about that, but it feels like we need to broaden the pool that we're fishing from to get those new leaders of the future. And I certainly think in financial services, we've got a job to do there. We're doing some more of that sort of thing in St. James's Place. There's financial education, but there's also understanding there is a wealth of careers and really interesting jobs to do in all of our sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Okay. Well, let's move on from the sad pandemic. It's a heavy one. So Natalie, you started to bring this up, so I want to spend some time around diversity and inclusion. So, I think last year was a decent year in moving that conversation forward, but there's still so much that has to be done. There's plenty of data that exists that supports the idea that diversity, diverse teams, diverse companies perform better, they make better decisions. Trying to focus this a little bit on, again, our day-to-day, how can we make digital experiences, digital marketing more inclusive and more diverse? What are you trying to do yourself? What have you observed around you that you think has worked well? I think it might be helpful to think of some specific steps that folks listening in could take in their own roles to try to pursue more diversity within their marketing efforts. So Natalie, I'd like to start with you.
Yes. Yeah, of course, it's quite a difficult topic because we all have biases, and I think we all struggle with what's the right way to do it right. And it also depends whether you look at it from a global perspective or a local perspective, because diversity in a global perspective is very different than in a local perspective. To give you an example, I actually had a discussion on Friday with someone, because from a global company perspective, whether it's marketing or your employees, you benchmark it to the main dominant within your global organization. Whereas if you are, for example, in a local market, the employees are more homogeneous from a cultural background. So then the diversity is much more about regional. Are the employees coming from different locations in that country, or do they have different type of personalities and different qualities? So I also actually realized, diversity is the whole spectrum, and also inclusion, it's so much wider than we tend to think. Because I think often what happens that we perceive diversity from a cultural color background, but it has so many more dimensions to it. Also what Harry just mentioned about people speaking up, that one person is maybe a little bit more shy, but has just as much to share as someone who's more brave to speak up. But indeed, as a brand, as a company, I think it's how you approach your marketing journey. It's about what type of models do you use in your advertising, in your visualization of your message, the tone of voice, the wording, the whole journey also in terms of the agencies you work with, the different outlets you use in terms of media. Are you reaching all your customers, or are you always choosing the traditional titles, for example, with newspapers? I think if you want to do it right, you need to really check the journey from the beginning to the end and audit it and really benchmark it and research it and make sure, based also on data, because I think you really need to justify it and research it well and not make assumptions. And I'm really prone, and I think it's important to use people from the external environment. So for example, if there is a lacking audience that you're not reaching, then ask that audience to help you reach that audience, because often you don't have any idea how to best reach them or how to communicate well or what type of, for example, social platforms to use. But if you ask that audience to support you in that journey and to help you in that whole creation process, then that also allows you to enhance that process in general. And also, I think back to purpose, and your customers will also see that you're authentic and not just doing it for commercial sake or because it's a trend.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
I think you can also bring it back to something that actually adds value to your company. So really in case of turnover money, because understanding your customer, that is what we're trying to do all day. And these different cultures will actually help you to understand your customers because they all think in a different way. So diversity is not only the segmentation between man or woman or the color or whatever, it really is understanding the specific concerns that motivate people from different cultures. And I think, again, data is there to help you and really see from a marketing perspective where you may have been missing a beat, and that will actually expand your business. So don't only look at it to see from, I have to be compliant to a certain diversity standard, or I don't know what kind of metrics you want to set on this, but I really think it will also help you to add more value to your company.
To jump on that point, Olga, and I know that I absolutely agree with you about the idea that it's not just as simple as the demographic between men and women, but just because it's quite an interesting fact, well, interesting to me anyway, we found in kind of wealth management terms that, and I guess there's no surprises here, I've talked about it already, but we are missing a trick in terms of advising women. And we're missing a commercial imperative. So there's approximately £30 billion worth of funds out there that we're not tapping into from a wealth management perspective. And so that's commercially very attractive. And why are we not doing it? It's because we're a male-dominated industry, and people will seek like, as we know, in terms of bias. But also it's beyond that. There's a societal imperative for us too. We know that women will run out of money 10 years before they die. So their retirement funds will, they will be potentially much more likely to be in abject poverty before they die than men, because they haven't sorted out their financial needs. And that's for a number of different reasons, education around it, fear. And we absolutely do have a moral responsibility in my industry to address that.
Wow, I did not know that.
It's
go ahead.
It's so all true, and I'm all with you, Natalie, Harry, and Olga. And for me, and bringing to a more general management leadership perspective, I think also the key is to be brave and take action. And I think if we really want to do it, it is possible. And I think we have to uplift and protect the people who differ in whatever form from the majority. And should it become necessary, we have to facilitate and moderate onboarding and potential conflicts. I think this is key from the daily experience. And I think we should be brave and shape the future together.
Yeah, it's a tall order.
Nice.
All right. So trying to come around to, I think, our last section, I thought it might be useful. I always enjoy hearing about people's career and how they got to where they were, and sort of their advice that they might have to share. And again, you're all coming at this from different backgrounds, different industries. I think people listening in would probably like to hear more about some of the challenges you faced, the opportunities that you've had. So I thought we could spend a few minutes on that. So Olga, I wanted to start with you because you've really, I think, done a good job of growing your career and trying some new things. You talked about with us, how you wanted to learn more about the technology side of marketing, and you're doing that. So what advice do you have for people who are trying to start a career within digital marketing, and how have you kind of gone about that?
Yeah, I thought about that because I think most of it is just focus on your own interest. So what is it in your daily job that makes you happy, and how can you steer your environment in putting you into a situation where you can spend more time on what is actually driving you? So my main advice is focus on yourself and don't care about others. That sounds very selfish, which it actually is. But I think it's more important, like women in general have the feeling that they have to adapt to their environment, where I think we should focus much more on what drives us and what is really our passion, because what is coming out of that is so powerful for everyone. That's the key area where you should focus on. And I think career is something that deserves a very long breath. Is that a good English word?
Sure.
So you should really focus on where you want to go and where you want to get to, and what is making you driving. And then look in your surroundings. Where are the opportunities to step into that? And for me, that was digital. I really like to dive into that and to learn more about it. I'm coming from a marketing communication background, so in that area, I think my main learning for myself is learn to adapt. because this world is changing so rapidly. If you stick to the beliefs and the technology of today, you're outdated tomorrow. So I think it's more regards learning to adapt to the situation that you're in while you're focusing on yourself.
Yes, can't forget that. That's a good perspective. So Natalie, you're a full-time working mom of color in a predominantly part-time working environment. So the part-time thing was actually very interesting for me to hear more about as we were talking previously, because it's not really how things are here in the US. So what advice would you have for, that's a challenge in and of itself. What advice do you have for people to turn that challenge into a positive opportunity if they might find themselves in a similar situation?
Yes, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I've always worked full time. I'm 53 now, and I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. But I always wanted to be very engaged when they went to primary school. And most of the moms worked part-time or were at home. But I still wanted to be the class mom and the library mom and all of those type of activities at school. I was really, really involved. But I always tended to look for a company where I could be flexible. I have to say I also freelanced for a while, but I always made sure that the companies where I worked allowed that flexibility. And what my partner really taught me from a male perspective is that don't wait with asking those type of questions. The moment you have your interview, immediately make sure that you kind of tick that box, that you tell them that you need that flexibility when possible, of course. So that's one of my learnings. And then more from a practical perspective, so I've been like the class mom for my kids, but because I knew I wouldn't deliver quality if I would do it by myself, I always partnered with another mom, usually also someone who worked full time, and I wanted to be a class mom so that we just shared the project actually. And so that's how I solved it for myself. So I never felt guilty about being a working full-time mom. My son is 18. I think he's actually watching because I shared the link with him. And my daughter is 16. And I'm very fortunate. They've never told me that I wasn't there for them because, I just organized it and made sure that I found that balance from the start.
Yeah, it's tricky. My mom was full-time working my whole life, and I used to feel upset that she couldn't chaperone a field trip. And then when I started working, I realized, oh my God, I can't believe people do this. They go home and they have to take care of a family. So I understood it more once I was actually of an age. So, So Andrea, you're, the CEO in the room. Obviously, you've touched on this a little bit, but a lot of times we look around boardrooms and leadership rooms and don't see enough women. How have you kind of become in the position that you are? And again, like what advice do you have for others that are seeking out that type of leadership role? How can we find more roles like that for women? Oh, I think you're on mute. Andrea, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. After that time of video call, so I'm sorry.
Okay. I thought it was just me.
So I think as women, we should give ourselves the permission to be courageous and forge our professional path in our way, even against resistance. I think this is very important. And above all, without adopting the usual conventional approach. So this is what I believe really. So, and I think we should motivate other women to do the same. So let's motivate and support each other when the things going gets tough, and cheer loudly when things run well. So I think this is also very important. And I think the world needs female leaders who don't give up and are willing to make an impact. But I think you have to raise your voice. Yeah. One last thing, sometimes I learned it's good to approach professional challenges a little bit as an athlete would, with a kind of fun and resilience, and to simply enjoy creating, forming, shaping. So then I think we can make really an impact together.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And then Harry, you, I think, find yourself in a situation that I'm sure a lot of us have found ourselves in at some point, which is the male dominated sort of sector. And you've touched on this a bit, but what advice do you have for people that would like to forge a career in, whether it's financial or other sectors that have tended to be more male dominant?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of seemingly deliberately forced myself into situations like this along the way. I actually started out my career as a biochemist, and there were only 2 other biochemists in my qualifying year out of about 60 people. And I ended up in finance. I'm sort of like your patron saint of people who didn't know what they were going to do. And I would say very simple. I mean, great advice from the other people in the room, and absolutely would nod to you guys. And I'm going to take some of those notes myself. But what I would say is what got me where I am today was I was absolutely doggedly consistent. I set my goals for things I wanted to achieve, and I didn't overpromise and underdeliver. I was always consistent. People could always rely on me. And I think that meant that I was given more responsibility. I took on more responsibility and I delivered on it. So I would just say one thing from me would be consistency. Just be consistent to things you promise you can deliver.
Yeah, that's a big one. And taking on, doing a good job creates more responsibility and more work, I've always felt, but you have to say yes to things. Well, thank you. That's really good advice. So we're coming into the last few minutes here. Just a reminder, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. I had a few just sort of fun ones we could wrap up with as well. So just a quick round robin. What is the one piece of technology you could not live without? We'll start with Olga.
Smartwatch. Nice. To connect it all.
Yep, good one.
Unfortunately, I need both. 2 things, my mobile and my iPad. So both give me the freedom to work wherever I would love to.
Nice.
I would say my phone. My phone is really the heart of everything. Yeah. Couldn't live without my phone.
Am I allowed to say a platform?
Sure.
I'm actually scared to say the platform because I'm not suggesting anybody should find me. But I get my sanity from Twitter. Don't look me up.
Disclaimer. Nice. All right. Well, then let's end with some positive advice here. So how do you keep your teens, keep yourself motivated for now, for the next few months? We're still obviously in a challenging time. And so how are you keeping yourself motivated? How do you think others can do the same? Let's start with Andrea.
So first of all, I think information, dialogues as much as possible. And what we did, and with a quite good response, was we offered company yoga and Pilates and things like that, so that you can see each other in another environment. So this is what worked well with us.
Nice. How about you, Olga?
I think being open and transparent about all the frustrations and the issues that you're facing. So then you get familiar with the issues that are happening at each and every single layer of within the organization. So if you're a man, women, CEO, or whatever kind of position you have, everyone is struggling in these kind of situations. And I think that helped all of us actually to gain more understanding of why people are late or why people are not entering a certain meeting or not working in the afternoons with the 4 kids on our lap. I think that is creating a lot of understanding, and then trying to bring that into something positive is really how can you help each other into the situations that you are. So if someone is struggling with all the other afternoons, try to set up the meeting in the morning instead of in the afternoon. I think these kind of small and simple tricks can help each other on collaborating in these tough times. But luckily schools are open in the Netherlands again, so
yeah,
my problem is solved.
All right, Natalie, quickly to you.
Yeah, I have to say being more vulnerable, but that's more a personal life lesson, that I've been much more vulnerable indeed about everything and anything that's happening to me this year, to my manager, to my colleagues, to my friends. And that indeed opened up courageous conversations with each other, but also helping each other and providing support. And what I do on a personal level is that I try to have during the week at least one person over for lunch in between, even if it's only half an hour or an hour, just, to have that private moment to have a nice chat, whether it's a colleague or a friend. And on Saturdays, I like to host. I'm not a good cook, but I love to host. And on Saturdays, I also make sure that I have like someone coming over. In Holland, you only are allowed to have one person over now in your house. So it's difficult at times. So if it's 2 people, then it's outside.
Nice.
Well, that's how I survive.
Okay. And last to you, Harry.
So I think the thing that I think my team missed the most, and lots of people have missed, is the kind of the slightly informal, you walk into the coffee machine together and you just shoot the breeze on stuff. And so you kind of have to engineer them quite hard, and they're hard on Teams. It's hard to kind of, we have, my team have a Friday call, and it's, that it was way before I joined that they'd set it up. And it's strictly no work. And, we sometimes break the rule and we can't help it, but it's about just saying, just talking about, it's as if you're leaving the office. What are you doing this weekend? That sort of thing. And we had a meeting, and it was just a really nice way of starting one of the collective meetings we had. And we started out by having breakout rooms for 15 minutes, and you could choose which breakout room you went into. There were 4, and I'm going to forget which were all of the 4, but there was one that was kind of well-being and nutrition. There was one that was hobbies. So somebody could, somebody would kick off and talk about their, a particular hobby, and they could showcase what they did. And there was another one that was about, my favorite book or my favorite film. And it was just kind of, just to help the conversation, to have a bit of structure around those. And it went down so well. And, and it meant there was a bit of networking as well. So opportunities like that create, kind of digital spaces that aren't about the next project you're working on.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, this is really good advice. Thank you. We've gone a few minutes over, but I wanted to make sure we had a chance to end on a good positive advice note. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to this amazing group of panelists for sharing all sorts of different perspectives. Hopefully everybody was able to take something away that can help them in their job or in their day or in their life. So thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.